right, so it's some little mini talk that I'm calling it's the beginning of the world as we'll know it. So I'm going to see how we feel about it. All right, it's telling my screen sharing is paused. Let me reshare and see what happens. So always good to have just a little bit of a technical surprise right at the end. So, all right, there we go. Everything should be good. So I'm assuming everybody can see me and everything is fine. So you saw, if you were at the opening this morning, you saw sort of an abbreviated version of this, but also apologies if it's your second time seeing this today or some other talk in the past, but there'll be more than just this example. But I want to kind of walk through a potential future learning experience that's, in the future, but parts of it maybe not necessarily so far away in the future. So we have somebody here who is a student, and this is a student who is in sitting there in his room, and doesn't look like he's going to school, doesn't look like he's studying or learning anything. He's sort of staring. He's staring at his desk, which doesn't even have a laptop or anything. So what's he doing? And what he's doing is the following. So in this experience, flicks a little, flips a switch, and all of a sudden, there's a projection of ancient Greece in his room on his wall. And, in an ideal world, it would be one that he could even, interact with substantially. So, okay, so he's got this ancient Greece sort of hologram, and he might ask, is that the Acropolis? As now we can see the zoomed in view of what he would be seeing. And who's he talking to? He's talking to an AI-based coach. And so the coach would come up and say, there actually were a number of buildings known as the Acropolis, or known as an Acropolis in ancient Greece. Tells him a little bit about what the word means and that this is the Acropolis. So yes, in fact, he is right. So here's this AI coach who's helping him through things. He might talk to her by talking. He might talk by typing. Some future world you might communicate by brainwaves. I don't know how I feel about that. I know there are headsets out there, starting to do things like this. We'll see. He may ask, did the Acropolis always look the same over the years? It's kind of a question that might come up as he's looking at this. It's clearly not exactly what it looks like today if he's been there. And says, well, we don't know much about the architectural appearance of the Acropolis before the Archaic era, which started in the 8th century BC. One major addition was when Pisistratus built an entry gate. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Well, all right, he may ask, well, who was that? Okay, which tells him to take a look first, so we can look carefully. And then, critically, he's going to ask, who was Pisistratus, and she can tell him. He's the ruler of ancient Athens. During most of the time, he can show what he looks like. She's a magic AI coach. She has access to lots of things, and she can bring them up to show him. So she brought up to show him what the, to switch his view and let him see another building, and then to give some more information. This was the son of Hippocrates. That's its own interesting story. We could maybe follow that along. She might decide that if this is something he was interested in, she would pursue it even further and say, let me tell you more about Hippocrates. You're going to want to know. But he kind of just goes, the Acropolis is so much bigger than I imagined, goes on and on. Leaving the virtual world, visiting Greece today. So suppose he gets to go on a trip, our same student. And let's say we're lucky enough that he gets to go on a trip, or he's lucky enough that he gets to go on a trip. And here he is. The AI coach can be there on his phone or using some modern form of AR goggles or whatever else comes next. He could also be communicating with other classmates, so he can be there physically and also, be interacting with the same kind of coach, the same exact coach who knows about him, who knows about his experiences in ancient Greece through his little holographic exploration, and can take advantage of that and bring that all into a learning experience. So we just get a few bits and pieces of what this learning experience could be, and it could even be more than that. So that's an interesting thing to show kind of a vision of what we might want to do. So this has a lot of key elements that match the kinds of things that we've been talking about throughout this conference and that I think we want to have in an ideal learning experience. It's experiential. It was a very realistic context, right? He's looking to this hologram and interacting with this holographic representation of ancient Greece. So that's that's a lot more than just reading some facts in a history book. It's a lot more interesting. It's a lot more connecting. It's a lot more emotionally connecting. I mean, it kind of goes along with Deb's vision of museum artifacts in the real world, museum experiences in the real world, in a very in a sort of a technological way. he has coaching guidance, right? So he's got somebody helping him. So, you can go explore, but you can also go explore with the help of somebody experienced. And, I think the way that I would envision this, you could turn the coach on, you could turn the coach off. Maybe you want to be alone, maybe you want to be on your own. You don't want to be bothered with a coach jumping in and saying, hey, take a look over here, right? Some people like museum tours, some people, with a headset, some people prefer not to have them. Some people, it's, different times, different places, different moods. So, the idea is learner control. The idea is that there's a lot of, you have a lot of say in your learning experience. But it's really nice to have, you're going to want to involve the coach a lot more if you think the coach is helpful. Right? The same way that you want to talk to a good teacher or a good coach, and if you're on a sports team, if you have a good relationship with them, and if you like them, and if you think they they you, and all of those things, if they think that you're getting something out of it, right? I think we've all had, educational experiences where we felt like, well, the person teaching the class, I'll do what I got to do, but I don't have that much more I want to do. And somewhere you feel like this is somebody I want to, really spend a lot more time talking with. This person really understands what I'm interested in and might be able to point out interesting things for me. And, I get a lot out of these conversations and enjoy them and all of that. You also get feedback, right? So you get feedback from a coach and from peers. We didn't really see you getting feedback from peers, but certainly in the modern Greece world, you can imagine doing that collaboratively with other people, as well as with the AI coach. And the ancient Greece world as well, right? You can imagine experiences that are not just you and an AI coach, but are you and your peers and an AI coach. So it's as if you're getting to visit Greece together with other classmates and with the coach. And all of this can be part of the kind of experiences that we could eventually design. Okay, we're not there yet on a lot of these things. Parsing text is hard, parsing language is hard, whether it's, particularly whether it's verbal or text, but just parsing language is still a hard problem. Having a coach that could react realistically in all cases is certainly difficult. But, there are things that we can do that are a big step closer to this, even now. There's a lot of learner control, but the learner is assisted and advised. So the learner is not on his own, unless maybe he wants to be. It's a very immersive and personalized experience, and we could add more learning by doing. I didn't show that much learning by doing. He could be asked to, try to take a challenge, right? He could be asked to, rebuild a part that had, what do you do to rebuild a part of the Acropolis that's fallen down? What do you do, if you want to learn about Socrates by, discussing things with Socrates? And again, I won't say what kind of dialogue that would be, but you can have a conversation with a simulated character. You might be asked to do something and, make decisions and, complete a challenge. All of those things are potentially possible in this kind of simulated world. So let's for the moment assume there's probably a lot more we could talk about with that. But let's also assume that our imaginary student still lives in a world where he's got to work and he's working a retail job. So he goes off to his training, but his training is also modernized. So, you might imagine that, by the time we have this kind of training, retail jobs will have changed. But for now, he's going to training. But his training also looks like this. His training is a projected retail store, and he's got to help an actual customer. So he can say to her, hey, can I help you find anything? He seems to be looking. And the AI coach can jump in and say, hey, make sure that you smile and you look friendly. All right. Okay. And that could be based on things that the system senses, right? So, the system already can understand my tone, we would think. We saw Fernando's example of some of that earlier this week. Can it read my facial expressions? It's not out of the question. Right? So it might know that I'm smiling. It might know that my tone is right. It might know that I sound friendly or don't. Enough to be able to jump in and say, all right, so back to this again, here in a different situation. And she may say, yes, can you have this, do you have this in a size small? And say, okay, sure we do. Let me check for you. So the simulation can go on and on. And at the end of it, the AI coach says, yeah, overall you did great, but you need to work more on your facial expressions, because in this world, it's evaluating my facial expressions. And here we decided, I decided in this imaginary future world, what do we think about assessments? Are they all, I feel like numerical assessments get a little bit oversimplified and over used at some point, but this is maybe an interesting one to try. So, she evaluates me on wording, tone, facial expressions, and overall customer satisfaction. And kind of the lesson I'm getting out of this one is, I used the right words. My tone was actually pretty good. I didn't really look happy enough. And probably she responded to that. And that's why the customer is not feeling like, 100% great about me or even 80% great about me. So we'll see. That's another imaginary training world. And these are all things that, like I said, they're not things we could necessarily do, but they're not that far from things that we could do today. To be this kind of coach, you would really need a lot of data, and a lot of data about the person and their strengths and weaknesses and their past experiences and their likes and dislikes and interests. And that was one of the questions that I asked Mike this morning in the keynote, was to just get his view on data security and all of that, which is certainly a concern. Like once all of that information is somewhere about you, you want to make sure it doesn't get misused in any way. But to have a personalized kind of experience at this level on a large scale, it would, you really want to have that kind of information and be able to build that kind of experience, kind of in the way that we were talking about in the panel. We're talking about these experiences that you can have that are very, they cause you to think critically. They're very individualized. You're in a different position. It's not the teacher and the student. It's really under your control. And in order to do that on a large scale and reach a universal audience, right? Once we build this, it should be available to everybody. Why would it not be? Right? Maybe the teachers that we have aren't available to everybody. I said I was fortunate enough to go, as I mentioned earlier in the panel, I was fortunate enough to go to an elementary school for a number of years that was, really followed a lot of the philosophies that I've always believed in, and that many of us believe in. And that's not accessible to everybody. We moved and all of a sudden it wasn't accessible to me. But if it's in an online environment, it is accessible. And it doesn't mean that it's all that your educational experience could be or would be, but it's a big step above what we can do now, and puts you in a position where it's both, it's a human way to use technology, and puts you in a position where you can collaborate with real life teachers, real life coaches and mentors, and other people in an online way. And again, I'm not suggesting we rule out in-person interaction. I think we've certainly seen over the past 15 months that we miss in-person interaction and can't stare at a screen of any form all day. But blending the worlds, and these are holograms too a lot of times, right? So in this vision, we're blending the real and we're augmenting the real world. We're blending the real world with the digital world, and in that sense, changing the world and building experiences in that new and changed world that I think would feel different and would be tremendously effective. Key elements of the experience that we had here with the trainer, with the training experience in the retail world. Again, this was experiential, right? So nobody was telling me, here are the rules of customer service and I have to pass the test on them. Right? Doesn't matter what I know, it's what I can do. And even if I know it, doesn't mean I can do it. If you ask me, should I smile or not? I'd probably say, I bet I should. And I'd get that question right on the test. Would I do it? Well, I might. That guy didn't though. So, not everybody would, but he probably knew to do it. Learning by doing, right? So again, I learned by actually doing, practicing a real skill. We saw some of Shelby simulations earlier this week. We've seen some others as well. Learning by doing is incredibly valuable. And here I'm in a situation where I practice what will be my job by actually doing it, not by reading about it, not by taking a test on it, not even just by watching it. There are ways you might want to augment this, right? So suppose I made a mistake. You could imagine, when the coach jumped in and said, you should smile more, maybe the coach should then show me somebody appropriately, interacting with a customer. So I have a way to model my behavior. That would be great. So it doesn't mean you don't want those things, but learning by doing is really at the heart. Which also we know from the educational research, particularly seminal work by Alan Collins and John Seeley Brown. There's an article from the late 80s that I refer to often by Brown Collins and Paul Duguid on authentic activities and how authentic activities can really result in transfer. And so we want skill transfer to the job, right? The end goal of the little training experience we just saw is to be really good at helping retail customers, right? So that's the goal. The goal isn't to pass the test. I think to Antonella's point in the panel about the assessment. We had coaching guidance. We had a coach helping me through it, right? I wasn't stranded on my own. I wasn't just guessing. You could imagine this would also be a nice assessment, right? You take away the coaching and you put people in a situation where you have to help customers. And if they're doing really well at it, they're ready for real ones. And if they're not, they probably need a little bit more time and more work. Feedback from a coach and theoretically from peers. So again, here it was really from a coach in what we saw, but you could also imagine working with peers and having others involved, watching you, participating with you as you do this. Learner control, again. So the learner controls the experience to a large degree, right? Here, you're really in a situation where you're asked to do something. So you have less sort of open-ended control than the student in Greece, right? The student in Greece was a very exploratory environment, right? He's somewhere. I don't really know how he got there, whether he chose to be there or didn't choose to be there, but he's kind of got a lot of freedom. He can go where he wants. Here, you're asked to do something in particular. It's a lot more tightly scoped, it's a lot more focused, but you control how you do it. You control what you say. You decide what you want to say. You decide your facial expressions, you decide your tone. But learn also is assisted and advised. You're not on your own. And along with the feedback, you do get feedback on what you did. So you're not left guessing. Right? Because that's the other thing about learning by doing in the real world that I think happens, all the time, right? Is, you don't really get enough feedback. Sometimes you don't really want all the feedback, right? You can have a conversation with a coworker and you think it went well, and they don't think it went well. And you're never going to know sometimes. You probably won't know unless you've had several of those and it becomes obvious, and it would have been maybe nicer to know early on. But that stuff is difficult. It's difficult in a standard interaction. With the safe simulated environment, you can get something out of that. I think you get some feedback in a way that's easier to take for a lot of people. And overall, the experience is immersive and it's personalized, and it feels like you're doing something valuable, and it feels like something that you find interesting. All right, one more. This future vision. Talked a fair number of times in this conference, not just about educational methods, but about just-in-time learning, okay, and just-in-time performance support. So, in the workplace, often there's still lots of training that maybe we don't really need, that what we can do is instead replace it with something that's just in time. Hal Christensen certainly talked a lot about that yesterday, and others as well. So here's one from a veterinarian's office, kind of just a short example, which is not just so I can show dog photos. That always gets people's attention, late at the end of a conference. So we're going to do that. So we have a veterinarian. We're got a dog that she's working with, and the AI coach might be able to jump in and say, hey, based on the information that I got from these sensors, you might want to, evaluate her right back paw, right? So we can have sensors, maybe the dog's got a little sensor, maybe it's simply, some other kind of sensor that we're using. There is, I happen to know there's actually work in veterinary medicine on kind of trying to use sensors in different ways to look for things that are unusual, even including things like, diseases that a particular dog might be, or a particular animal might be susceptible to. So there are things that people are experimenting with, and there's something to that could work here. All right, so we might look closely at the right back paw. Can't really see that much. Okay, well, I think I see a spot on her ear. Not sure if I should be concerned about it, so we can get anywhere with the paw. This is, at this point, our veterinarian, who is us in the simulation. But she also might be able to contact a colleague, which is what I was looking for here, which is the colleague says, I biopsy just to be safe, right? So here's an oncologist colleague. There are veterinary oncologists, there are specialists. You might want to call them in. And so here's an easy way to do that. In current veterinary practice, you often, fax information over to a colleague. It's really amazing that's still true. In this, you're in a just-in-time situation, you might be able to reach somebody. So you've got this sort of automated coach helping you, and you've got real people collaborating with you. So yeah, that's just a brief sense of what we might want to do just in time and how things might look a little bit different. So this is just-in-time performance support, but with some coaching guidance, right? So there's an AI coach who knows some things and might have suggestions. You're, hopefully done in a way that people would find acceptable, right? Like, if you're an experienced veterinarian, you might want to think of what's this AI coach going to know that I don't know. So coaching may not be exactly the positioning. Maybe it's the, it's the support. Maybe it's the, it's just coming as if it's from the sensor. And the sensor would, something would light up and say, the sensor says, it looks like there's a little bit, there's a little bit of blood on a right back leg that's kind of, closer to the surface than usual. Maybe there's a cut. But still, under this model, we're integrating other technology into the experience. We heard Ilona talk about wearable technologies in learning, and had a whole keynote about that and a breakout session and all kinds of great things. And this is one place that might work in this vision, and it might be integrated. And you also got real-time collaboration with colleagues. So, again, the idea and one of the philosophies that I try to always adhere to and think through this is trying to, again, humanize the use of technology more than anything else, right? So we're not trying to replace people with machines. We want machines to do things that are going to improve society, make it easier for people to work with each other and talk with each other and communicate with each other. You know, and I'm not advocating that we spend all our time on screens, but you know, when you have, you know, you don't have a veterinary oncologist colleague in the room with you if you're a normal veterinarian. I mean, it's just, you know, they're somewhere else. So this is a way that you could reach people, kind of, you know, more analogous to the way that we're reaching each other today from a distance when it wasn't practical for us to all be in the same place. All right. So I'm going to close on a Steve Jobs photo, and not exactly a quote because the quote is actually mine, but one of the points that I think I want to make is that sometimes the invention is the mother of necessity. And the reason I have Steve Jobs up here is that he was notorious for disparaging focus groups in marketing, and instead kind of looking to invent. And you know, I appreciate that philosophy in a lot of ways. Like you want, you know, people, you know, nobody knew that they wanted an iPhone. It wasn't something that anybody would say, hey, you know, I want one of those necessarily. They knew when they saw it. He understood the audience. He understood their goals. He understood what kinds of things you might want to design to help people achieve goals that they at least, you know, would have if they knew about them. So there's something in the world of creativity that's not always necessarily directly responsive to an audience need. It has to take into account the audience and their needs and goals. You can't do it without the audience. And I think you want to early and often user test and all those things. But in terms of the initial idea, a lot of the times a great idea comes from something that you think of that people are going to want because you've really thought hard about the audience, and then you end up being able to propose it rather than waiting for the audience to say, hey, I want this. So there's something in that, in reinvention and reimagining, sort of an underlying point I want to make. So summarize a few things. Yeah, you know, I advocate designing new experiences that make the most of new technologies, right? So we're not just transferring existing experiences to a different technology. You know, David Kelly mentioned the other day something I've mentioned in my talks as well, the idea that back in the early days of mobile phones, you saw a lot of online learning that was simply migrated to a mobile phone. You know, so it was something that was you did on a laptop, and now here it is on a small screen. But a mobile phone isn't just a small laptop. It's, first of all, it's a smaller screen, so some of those things were just unusable. But also, a mobile phone has lots of other things because it is in fact mobile. You know, you have it in your hand. You can take it places. Can you take it a step further? Can you use augmented reality because you're taking your phone some places? On and on and on. What can we do with each new technology? What kind of experience can we create that makes the most of it? Following active learning, situated learning principles, situated learning, you know, that you're learning in context. You know, that activities tend to be authentic. So again, following the Alan Collins work that I referred to earlier. Just-in-time learning and performance support are critical. You know, we don't want to assume that everything is only traditional education and training. You know, experiences can be immersive, relevant, personalized. Learners emotionally connect to them, and really, you know, to me, it's all about the experience. And there's so much that comes out of that, as we've talked about, even in the panel as well. So much there. One quick note, if you want to read more, I promised I would mention this. I have a book chapter out, kind of on this area called Reimagining Educational Experiences via Artificial Intelligence and New Technologies, and that's in a book that Sheila edited that you'll see below, that's coming from Taylor and Francis on June 23rd. So it's on its way. So apparently my copy is on its way already. We will see. So obviously happy to help people find that if you want. But on that note, let me wrap up, and I'm happy to discuss comments, questions, and anything else. I have just a couple minutes left since we've been spending so much time chatting through the panel and everything else. But I hope everybody enjoyed this. So I have another minute or two for questions before the break if there's more that we want to discuss. Right. All right. And on that note, I think we've covered up. I think on that note, we've covered everything that that we can, and maybe it. Let me see. All right. One more minute. I think Dan is saying there might be something for her to get to, so we're going to just end on it in this way. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else that we want to cover? All right. Well then, In that case, we're going to wrap up. We have a break until 3:30. So thanks again to all of you for being here. Look forward to seeing you again. Parallel sessions at 3:30, followed by a brief closing session at 5, and I'll wrap us up for the week. So again, hope you enjoyed this little demo and our panel before it. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you back at 3:30.